So I can't join the anti-abortion fervor of conservatives, but I am far more appalled by the pro-choice side who think that abortion is something to celebrate.
I'll just, I suppose, lay my cards on the table. I am very pro-choice. I think it's good for society in terms of demographics. I think it's good for the concept of individual rights and liberties. I think that if personhood were granted to a pre-viable fetus or an embryo, it cheapens the dignity of human life under the law. But at the same time, I do dislike very strongly, and I think they should be illegal unless to save the life of the mother, abortions from fetal viability onward. If the fetus is alive in and of itself, if it's able to sustain its own life, if it is developed to the point where it is alive on its own merits, then it just so happens to be inside of the woman. That's my point of view. And aborting it then, I think quite clearly is infanticide, and I oppose it as such because of individual rights and liberties. Although, of course, if the woman is going to die for having continued her pregnancy, then I think she should get preference over the viable fetus, even though it is obviously a very murky matter in any case. But no, when it comes to the abortion of embryos or unviable fetuses, I have no problem with it. I don't think they're alive in any philosophical or bioethical sense. That being said, I do feel most comfortable, and I think everyone, generally speaking, well, not everyone, but most people do, with abortions being performed within the first trimester, within the first 12 months. It's what Roe v. Wade originally referred to for a reason. And I think that it's good that most abortions are performed in this period. I think 12 weeks, 3 months is more than enough time to get an abortion. So ideally, most would happen within that 12-week window. And, if one's going to call an embryo, it's something that should have the same rights as an infant. I really don't have any words for that. I think it speaks, I'm not talking about Luke, I'm saying generally, I think it speaks to a certain biological ignorance. I know Luke is not ignorant of human biology, and I did not mean to make it seem like I was talking about him here. I'm speaking generally about what I've heard from a lot of anti-abortion people. So it's really it's really an interesting matter in a host of respects, and there are a lot of different views on it. There's a lot of nuance, but it attracts a lot of fanatics. Luke mentioned fanatics on the left who have abortion parties, which is a little out there to say the absolute least. And then you, of course, have people on the right who basically would choose to save, if given the opportunity, a bunch of frozen sperm and eggs in a case, as opposed to a 3-year-old girl from, say, a collapsing building, because they view the sperm inside of the egg as just as much of a human being as a 3-year-old girl. So in their very skewed mindset, it's better to save the case full of these sperm and eggs which have met rather than the 3-year-old girl. So I mean, you get fanatics on both sides, but it's really crazy stuff. I think when you reach the point of having the abortion party, or when you think that the sperm and the egg are more important than, say, the 3-year-old girl, I think you've really gone to a place that is profoundly unhealthy. And of course, about when I say you, I don't mean Luke. It's a general thing. Luke, anything to say about what I brought up?
Well, there are primary emotions. Here's an analogy: there are primary emotions and there are secondary emotions. So, for example, anger is usually a secondary emotion. Anger is a reaction to feeling hurt. So, if I got really angry, God forbid, at Joseph, and let's say I misinterpreted what he just said as some kind of personal attack of me, and I got really angry at him, that would be a secondary emotion. It would be because I felt hurt that he had dismissed me or diminished me or scored me or put me down in some way. And then to cover up that hurt, I would try to cover up that primary emotion of hurt with anger to try to disguise it. And so too, I think there are primary issues and primary identities and secondary issues and secondary identities. I don't believe that abortion truly energizes people. It's a secondary, it's a proxy for identity. I think everything comes down to identity, and people with shreds of traditional ties to identity, to a local city or a local state or a particular way of life, or to a religion, or to traditional ideas of family, are going to use things like abortions as proxy to try to maintain their way of life. I think relatively few people actually care intensely about abortion, but tens of millions of people will be energized by abortion because it's a proxy for something deeper, which usually comes down to matters of identity.
And now, Luke, before we do move on, because I suppose as hot button of an issue as abortion is, there's only so much one could say about it. Uh, why do you think that so many on the right, who are obviously concerned with political demographics trending against them strongly, and I obviously do agree with you that there's no way this Texas law pans out well for the GOP electorally speaking, but why do you suppose there's so many of these conservatives who are obsessed with the Democrats getting more and more of the electorate, then oppose abortion, knowing that if there are no abortions, the Democratic share of the electorate increases exponentially? Oh, well, I guess maybe I've gone ahead of myself. Do you think it's that they don't know this, or do you think they do know it and they don't care? Do you think it's some sort of, something else? What's your take on the matter?
Well, I think when you can't say things out loud, people become more reluctant to even think things. So obviously, different peoples have different gifts, but you can't say this out loud with any specificity, or you are removed from polite society. So therefore, because you can't say such an obvious thing that the average gifts of Ashkenazi Jews are different from the average gifts of Japanese, which are different from the average gifts of sub-Saharan Africans, and different from the average gifts of Eskimos. All right. So because you can't say such a basic thing out loud, people in positions of importance, positions of fame, positions of influence are reluctant not just to say these things out loud, but even to think them. So because you can't talk about the demographic repercussions of abortion out loud, what you just said, that this would be frowned upon. Therefore, I think many people refuse even to think about these things, because they know that if they think about, say, group differences or demographics, that they will be that much closer to saying something out loud. Like a lot of people think, oh, I'll just say it to my friends, but then somehow it spills out. So I think people are afraid to even think the truth, even deal with the profound consequences of the demographic repercussions of abortion.